I didn't want to admit that I had limitations. Even though I knew I did, I didn't have a name
Yeah.
for it. And so I didn't have to face it. I didn't have to face that ugly monster in the room. That was in my brain all along.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of authenticity in the workplace and navigating it your way. Today, we're diving into the inspiring journey of Alysha-Aubrey Bursey. She's a dynamic leader and an advocate in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Alysha-Aubrey is currently the Senior Director of Affinity Programs at 1871, which is a tech innovation hub here in Chicago. In our conversation, we talk about how Alysha-Aubrey navigated the challenges of dealing with narcolepsy and how she got her diagnosis, and then how she dove into advocating for herself in the workplace, leveraging her experiences to become a leader and championing inclusion for others, and shared what she needed with her team and her manager in order to get the accommodations that she needed to thrive in the workplace. We also explore the importance of empathy and kindness and honest communication in building a really supportive and productive work environment. I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. Welcome to Working Your Way, Alysha-Aubrey. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're going to just chat about your career story today, and we'll start with maybe not your current role, but where you are today, which is something called 1871, which I think is fairly well known in the Chicago community among business people. But can you tell us a little bit about what is 1871?
Sure. 1871, we are named after the Chicago fire, not the destruction of it, but all the innovation that came afterwards. We are a tech innovation hub in the city of Chicago. We help startups throughout their entire maturity curve. So from I have an idea on the back of a napkin and I don't know where to start, all the way through Fortune 500 and everything in between. And we help with core business curriculum, personal and professional development. We do a little bit in funding and really just make connections between people. And we like to think of ourselves as an and to all the other places in Chicago that support technology and small businesses. So we don't like to compete. We don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to be an and for wherever you are. And we really pride ourselves on meeting people where they are. So we have members from all over the world and all over Chicagoland area. And we try to be as diverse and accommodating as the 77 neighborhoods in the city of Chicago and as diverse as the world.
Yeah, I love that. I love the and part, and I actually don't know that I've ever heard that before. I've been involved with 1871 for a couple of years now, attending events and things like that. And for me, as I guess I would call myself a solopreneur, a very kind of early stage business, it's so important to build community. And when
Mm-hmm.
you're building a business, it is like one of the most emotionally turbulent times, tumultuous. I was like putting all the words together. And having other people to be around to help normalize that experience, I think
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely invaluable. So I love what you all do, and I love the community that you build, whether it's, with members, with companies in the community. And I love it's like there's room for all of us. There's enough abundance and business for everybody. So that's amazing.
Yeah, we want to make sure that we're working with our partners like Matter and M Hub and P33 and we know that we can't be everything for everyone and we don't want to be. We want to help you where you are. And I really love that about us as a nonprofit. Sometimes nonprofits try to do everything or recreate the wheel over and over and over again, and then that just tears that community apart, right, and thins it out. And I think we try really hard to not do that.
Yeah, I love that. So how did you land at 1871 in your very first role there?
Yes. So I actually have a degree in music business. I thought I was going to work in music venues my whole life, and I love the music industry, but it wasn't paying the bills. So I got a job at a co-working space in Minneapolis, and they opened up a location in Chicago. I had been in Minneapolis my whole life, and I was like, they asked if anyone wanted to move to Chicago, and I raised my hand, and 2 weeks later I was in Chicago, didn't know a single soul, and it was great. And I discovered 1871. We had a bit of a, I don't want to say partnership, but it was a friendship with 1871 at the co-working space I was at before, and they had an events associate role open up. So 7 years ago, I got hired as an events associate, and I've been with 1871 ever since, rising through the ranks every year.
And you had a number of different types of roles, both in the music industry and outside of the music industry before you ended up at 1871. What did you take with you from those experiences?
Yeah, totally. Was raised to really take pride in whatever you're doing, whether that be, my first job with a paper route and being on time, which I wasn't always because I was eight, um, to, working at Dairy Queen for years and mopping floors. I did customer service. I think the longest I worked, I was a server and a bartender for 10 years. So really taking pride in what I do, and being kind to people and giving people grace. I think there's a big difference between being kind and being nice, and kindness always wins. Nice isn't always as authentic as you think it is. And that's really taken me far, is to just be proud of what I'm doing, no matter what it is, and never seen anything as below you. My dad has a saying that, in this, literally or figuratively, you can always wash your hands. So no matter how dirty you get, you can always wash your hands. You can always start over. You can always try again. And I really take that to heart.
I love that. I actually, it really like I've been working on this keynote talk and talking about some memories of growing up, and one of my very first, like my first official real job was detasseling corn because I grew up in Indiana. So
Okay.
I see you Midwestern. um, but it was one of those things where I think my dad was just really proud of me because I was like working hard and being
Mm-hmm.
independent and, and those kinds of things. So I feel like that value, I relate a lot to that. And what I think is really interesting, because I spent about 7 years in the Twin Cities,
Mm-hmm.
and in business, we would often have meetings with other companies, and everything would be super nice in the room and walk away. And then it was like, oh, actually, we don't really want to do that. And so the
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota nice, which is, it's especially funny because you're talking about not doing the fake nice, but really like spreading kindness through the work that you're doing. Did you ever have to like unlearn Minnesota nice?
It's funny you say that, because someone gave me probably the best compliment ever a few years ago when I moved here. They said, "You are the least Minnesotan I know." And they said that because Minnesota Nice is really Minnesota passive aggressive.
Yeah,
um,
okay, yeah. You
yeah,
said it, not me. You're allowed to.
yeah, it is. It's Minnesota passive aggressive. And I come from a father who he's honestly my hero, and he's very much always told you like it was, because he said, "I cannot read your mind and you cannot read mine. And so I have very little sympathy for misunderstandings if you don't tell me what you actually mean." And I
Mm.
feel that way in what I do. And I may give a little bit more tough love than some of my founders would like, but if they come to me at the end of a program and they say, "I didn't really get a lot out of that," I'll say, "Well, I see that you didn't show up more than half the time. You barely ever spoke. Did you ever help anyone else out?" It like, you have to help people in those ways, because sometimes it's a blind spot, I think, oftentimes. And I don't think this is just a product of where we are, our generation or the world or whatever, but it's so easy to only think about yourself, and why you're not getting what you think you deserve. But are you putting into what you hope to get out of. It goes back to, we're all taught the most important thing in the world in kindergarten, treat others as you would like to be treated.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. And I don't think people always do that.
Yeah. And it's interesting having so much, what I would call bucketed into maybe customer service, right? Whether it's serving in a bar or a restaurant or, throwing papers onto the neighbors' lawns. Like the idea of like the customer is always right often does a disservice to that customer, right? And when you're talking about working with founders of businesses to say, hey, there's some accountability that you have in this process too. Where can you take responsibility for where your results aren't as you would want them to be?
Yeah, the customer is definitely not always right. I think that's a disservice for the people who are serving as well. There are situations, especially working in diversity, equity, inclusion, that I have to be cognizant of and walk a very fine line, which is why I got into it, because I love talking about those things and I love talking about the hard things. But you're right, it's doing others a disservice if you're not being honest or you're not giving them honest feedback. And I like to view that as kind of stealing from them, right? I'm stealing your growth away from you if I don't tell you what I'm seeing. And you're going to continue to make that mistake over and over and over again, unless someone has the guts to say something. And I might as well be that person.
Well, if you see something, say something, right? Isn't that the
right.
TSA?
Yeah. Exactly.
That's amazing.
But do it with kindness. Do it with kindness.
Yes. Yes. I think inherently in coming from an intention of wanting to help someone grow, wanting to help someone achieve their goals, there's an innate kindness that comes with. I mean, obviously there's, language and tone and all of those important things too, and how we deliver a message. But I think kindness is both tone and like the intention behind it. So I think that's such an important part of that you mentioned. I think it was Brene Brown who's known for the saying, clear is kind. There truly is a difference between being nice and being kind. Nice to me feels like pleasantry or politeness. It's making people feel comfortable. Whereas kind is the thing that's actually loving in the long run. Saying the thing that will make some people feel good is nice, but saying the thing that's true is being kind. And of course, we can always try to say it in a way that's not harmful or overly direct or critical. But let's talk about what we miss out on when we're being nice instead of clear and kind. We miss out on the opportunity to advocate for ourselves and what we need in a situation, which I believe helps us build our own self-trust and build our relationships with ourselves. And we miss out on the opportunity to make a project or a strategy or an employee or a team better. Calling out potential problems or providing feedback that will help someone achieve their goals in the long run. To me, the distinction is about that longer term outcome. Whether it's the success of a business or our own well-being, and saying what's in service of that, not what's in service of the thing that feels easier or more comfortable right now. I've been known to use the phrase with clients when they're dealing with conflict avoidance of bad news doesn't get better with time. And so the kind thing is to handle the discomfort now and have a better outcome later. Avoiding conflict and confrontation is a form of people pleasing. And we actually did a really cool deep dive on people pleasing in episode 35. So I encourage you to check this episode out if you struggle with conflict or like saying the difficult thing. And for the record, we all do this in some way, but give that a listen if you want to explore this topic further, including talking about all the very human things that get in the way of us saying something that others might not want to hear. Okay, let's get back to the conversation where we talk about Alysha-Aubrey's narcolepsy diagnosis and how it impacted her to finally have answers about something that she had been struggling with for years. So in your current role, you're the senior director of Affinity groups at 1871. What were some of the moments in your career that led you into DEI work?
So as I mentioned, I started on the events team at 1871. I moved over to the membership team. So again, more customer service. I seem to be stuck in that my whole life, which is okay. It's really important. And then about 6 years ago, I was diagnosed with an invisible neurological disability. So I have narcolepsy, and it really kicked the seat out from under me. I knew that something was wrong my whole life. I knew that. But after tests and tests and doctors and trying to figure it out, um, it just seemed like something was wrong with me as a person that was just there. And no matter what I did, no matter how many jobs I worked, no matter how hard I tried, was just always going to be there. And it was like I felt like it was a personality flaw. Um,
Mm.
and finally having a name to what was going on, I like to say it was simultaneously the best day and the worst day of my life. It was the best day because now I could name it and I knew what was happening, and I knew that it wasn't this personality flaw within me, that it's something that I could look in the face and try to work with. But it was also the worst day because it's incurable, and I will be dealing with this for the rest of my life. And it affects every fiber of my being, every moment of my day, every unconscious moment of my day. It affects everything. And being a hard worker, someone might say an overachiever, I didn't want to admit that I had limitations. Even though I knew I did, I didn't have a name for
Yeah.
it. And so I didn't have to face it. I didn't have to face that ugly monster in the room. That was in my brain all along.
Yeah, in a way, it's like knowing it gives you a sense of control, but it also takes the control away from you
Yeah.
at the same time.
It's a very topsy-turvy moment, and I'm still figuring it out. I mean, it's been 6 years, but I'm still figuring it out.
So, how was your narcolepsy impacting you? How was it making you feel not whatever it was, not enough, or like you were wrong in your work in some way? What was going on?
Narcolepsy, no matter what type you have, and there's two types, everyone has excessive daytime sleepiness. And the best way that I can describe it is after being awake for 48 hours, how do you feel? Tired, sluggish, can barely keep your eyes awake, can't think, a lot of brain fog. That's my
Mhm.
baseline. As a human
Mm.
being, that is my baseline. And so I would forget things, and I slip on my words, and I can't think of things, and I would no call, no show to work because I slept through the 17 alarms I had put on. I mean, I even invested an alarm clock once that literally shook my entire mattress and blared at me because I couldn't wake up. And I filled that gap with work. I had like 5 or 6 jobs at one time,
Wow.
um, and was going to school and was doing poorly in school. It took me a long time to get through school because I had a hard time focusing, and I would fall asleep during tests, and all these things. And that I thought there was something wrong with me, because I would see everyone. I'm young, and I'm like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be feeling like I can't wake up. I shouldn't, and narcolepsy has this beautiful thing where it's both sides of the coin. It's not actually just being tired. It's also, you get insomnia. So sometimes I would be
Oh,
up for 48
super.
hours. Yeah,
That's
it's great.
great.
Yep. Sometimes I get insomnia and I'd be up for 3 days, and then other
Ugh.
times I'd be sleeping for 24 hours and like only getting up to go to the bathroom. And like, I was like, this is wrong. This is so wrong. But I wasn't listened to by the establishment, by the medical world. And it took a very special doctor who I still see today to say, maybe you should try sleep study. And even that was hard because even that was, multiple tests and all these things. And it took about a year after I was told to go get a sleep study to finally get diagnosed.
Was there anything along the way between kind of knowing that something is off And actually getting to that diagnosis, this is a huge, very complex question, but I'm curious because I feel like medical advocacy is such a big topic. There are many, many people who get kind of their concerns ignored or denied when they're just trying to seek answers and to feel good. What helped you along the way to continue to advocate for yourself?
I think it was that innate need to figure it out and that work ethic in me that I just
Mm,
was not going to take no for an answer. Keep in mind, I didn't get diagnosed until my, mid 20s. So it took a long time. And especially when you are exhausted all the time, it's really hard to convince yourself to go back to the doctor again or call the insurance company again or try to figure something out. But I think even though I didn't want to admit that it was medical, I really didn't want to admit that it was just me. And so I kept going and kept trying. And, I hadn't even thought that it was narcolepsy, because the media portrayal of narcolepsy is really bad. It's often made fun of, always made fun of. I don't think I've ever seen a good depiction of it,
yeah.
where someone's just falling asleep in their soup, or in the middle of a sentence and just collapsing, and that is not what it is. And
Mm,
even the medical establishment in the United States is really bad about diagnosing it, because in the United States we glorify not sleeping and working 24 hours. And that's why Soylent was invented, right? Because someone didn't want to get up from their computer and stop coding. It's glorified. And so it was hard to get there.
and so with your diagnosis, how did that impact your career?
I should say things really took off from there, but there was about a year, maybe 2 years, where it was a lot of me continuing to advocate for myself. Now I had a reason, but I had to educate everyone around me, and especially my place of work. Even though the disabled community is the largest minority community in the United States, it's often overlooked when you think of diversity, equity, inclusion. And that that's sad, right? And so I had to educate people on the accommodations that I need, and to work hard to convince them that those accommodations were not me slacking off, or not me trying to get out of work, but something that I needed to do the best work that I could. And once I got there and I finally proved myself, now no one at my job would ever think to say, just because Alysha-Aubrey doesn't work 9 to 5 doesn't mean she's not one of the most productive people at the job. But at the beginning, it's hard to ask your boss, can I sleep in the middle of the day? Or
Yeah.
can I work when I have the mental capability to work? Because narcolepsy is the shattering of your sleep wake cycle. Before I finally got on the medication I am now, it was roulette every day to know when I was going to be awake or when I wasn't. And so telling my boss, I'm not here for these meetings, but I'm going to be working from 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. Is that okay? There's a lot of education and advocacy that went behind it. And that's how I got into DEI, because I realized that I was born with this and I could not help it. And just like the color of your skin or your sexual orientation or anything else about you that you can't help, that's really your superpower. It's not your hindrance. And I try to help other people see that, because I am a superhero. I get more work done than most people do in 3 hours than they do in their whole day.
I'm a firm believer in productivity is not about effort, it's about impact, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
not about hours, it's about how far you can move the needle and how well you can direct the energy that you do have into the things that really matter and the things that are going to make a difference. So, I think we're starting to get to a point in our work world where we're no longer saying like output equals hours. I hope it's continuing to get better. Maybe I just live in la la land because I work for myself, but you know,
It is starting to
but
get
I think
better.
it's important.
And it's this is going to sound terrible to say this, but COVID really moved the needle on that, no matter how devastating COVID was, and it was, and how horrible it really helped the disabled community a lot. Um,
Mm.
because it was finally seen that, oh, people can be productive at home. We do have laptops and wireless internet for a reason. You can take a meeting anywhere. Um, you know, it opened up eyes, and it's tragic that it had to be that way. But what in this world has ever changed simply because it was the right thing to do, not because it was negatively affecting a whole bunch of people. So
Right, right.
it really worked out for me. um, Sadly, I don't know. That's kind of, it's hard to say that because I know how terrible it was, but it was a good thing for a lot of us that had been, screaming into the void about workplace setup and how archaic it was. I mean, the 9 to 5 was set up during the Industrial Revolution. That was over 100 years ago. Like it's insane.
Right. Why are we working the same way in marketing that we're in factory work, right?
Right.
You don't need to have the same constructs and parameters around it. It doesn't make sense, but it's just nobody questioned it for a long time, or nobody questioned it enough, right? And
Right.
unfortunately, it took a global pandemic to be able to have an excuse to prove it out, right? Or a reason to.
Mm-hmm.
I want to take a second just to pause here and hold the complexity of her experience and the experience of so many who have an invisible disability, a condition that others can't see that impacts your work and life, frankly. Having this type of challenge impacting every hour of every day must be incredibly draining and just a lot to carry. And so I can certainly understand the instinct to try to blend in or act like everyone else or pretend it doesn't exist, or not to draw attention to the ways that you're different from others. I know neurodivergent folks can probably relate to having to mask the way that you naturally are in order to appear to operate the way that everybody else does. And I think it's important to remember that people will make assumptions based on what they see. And so if we're pushing ourselves, we're silently suffering, it's actually doing damage to us and it's not helping move toward a solution. So, whenever possible, we need to communicate. Alysha-Aubrey articulated her diagnosis and the accommodations that she needed to her managers in a way that helped them understand the implications if nothing changed. And it set the tone of urgency and importance around them supporting her in these changes. And I think we can all take some inspiration from this to, one, find a way to speak up, and two, when people speak up and you're on the other side of that table, to really listen and believe them. We're going to rejoin the conversation and talk more about how it was for her to share about herself and her needs more broadly to the team and how it was received. Now, I'm curious about sharing the information with your manager, with your teammates. How was it to share about your disability, especially an invisible or an unseen disability? What is it like? What worked well for you? What didn't work well for you?
Yeah, the unseen, the invisible is hard for people to understand. It's especially difficult for people to understand when they just think you're tired. Everyone gets tired. We're all tired. I get that. And I don't have the monopoly on being tired by any means, but it is a debilitating tired. It is a tired where you can no longer think, you can no longer function. And that's hard to put in perspective for people. So it's been a journey and it's been a lot of repetition. It's been a lot of, I need this to do my best work. And here is me proving that when you give me that, I give you my best work. And I think I shot myself in the foot a little bit. And I think all overachievers do. Because no matter what is happening, you always do well. So people feel that they can always count on you no matter what. And sometimes I don't think I've ever dropped a ball. But not dropping the ball took a lot of mental gymnastics and perseverance to not drop a ball. And I had to communicate that with my management, my senior leadership, that what you're seeing is the duck above the water. You're not seeing how much work is going in underneath the surface. And for me to be healthy and productive and continue to keep my sanity, I need some accommodations, and I need a little bit more time, or I need to work at different hours. So it's been a lot of education, a lot of repetition. I happen to be an open book, so I'll tell anyone that I have narcolepsy. I love to educate people on it because it's so misunderstood, but I know that that's not the way it is for everyone. And so finding advocates, there were a few people at work that would always stand up for me if they heard anyone talking about me. Why doesn't Alysha-Aubrey have to be in and sitting at her desk at 9 a.m.? Or why doesn't Alysha-Aubrey have to work back-to-back days if we have, two big events? And I had some champions in my corner that really stuck up for me, and I'll forever be grateful for them for doing that.
What is the right way to advocate for somebody or to champion them?
So I think that, when I'm not in the room, championing me. Sorry, that was hard to say.
I mean, we've both had a couple of those moments. It's just that kind of day.
I'll start over. When I'm not in the room, being my champion is what I need, right? I need someone to stick up for me and not let those misconceptions tarnish who I am as a person. When I am in the room, I need to speak for me. I've had some very well-intentioned friends, family, coworkers who have jumped to help me when I'm standing there. And that makes me feel small. It makes me feel less than. It makes me feel like I can't do it for myself. And I definitely can. I am more than happy to tell you what I need and what I don't need and what's helping and what's not helping. So if I'm in the room, let me speak. If I'm not in the room, feel free. Go for it. Get them for me, right? But let me talk.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think the idea of don't make assumptions ever about how somebody wants to be supported. I think that's it's a good broad general concept to say you can ask somebody what does championing them. I don't know why I tried that after it was already a complicated situation. Advocating for them, being an ally in whatever way that looks like, or to support them, asking them how they would like that to be done. But I appreciate the idea of if I'm there, just hand the ball over to me and let me go from there, and if I need your support, I can ask for it.
Right. And that's what works for me, right? But make sure you're asking. Maybe someone does want you to stick up for them. There are days when I'm just too exhausted to explain it. And some days I do tap in a friend, just can you please handle this or explain this, but asking someone how they would like to be advocated for is the best rule of thumb.
So navigating this space of, my needs are different than other people's. Sometimes that's apparent to them. Sometimes it's not apparent to them. And advocating for yourself. How did you then end up in affinity group work and kind of leading that?
I've always been interested in leadership development. I come from a family that has had very traditional jobs, a teacher. My father, he's happily retired now, and I'm so happy for him, was a computer technician, and I wanted to do the arts, right? And I wanted to do something very off the wall in the Bursey family household. I mean, everyone else in my family is an accountant. So I was a bit of a black sheep without being too strange. But I didn't always get the support or the kindness, the grace that I needed, the roadmap that I needed when I was younger. And I had to figure all that out for myself, and then put that together with now being diagnosed with a disability. I had to figure that out on my own too. There's forums and there's support groups, but I didn't find anything that was speaking to me. And so I had to navigate that myself. And so I wanted to help someone else. That was really the core of why I got into DEI, is that I wanted to help champion other people. I wanted to show the world that diverse teams are the most innovative, and to retain someone in the workplace is a lot less expensive than hiring new people. So building your culture correctly and understanding the needs of others and how that's never going to hurt your business ever. Of course, there are bad apples that take advantage, but the majority don't. And the majority that tell you what they need really do need it. And when you let them have those accommodations, when you let them have those schedules, they're happier, they're healthier, and they're only going to work harder for you. Putting people in boxes is really unhealthy, and no matter what box it is, um, and letting people be who they are, you're only going to get the best out of them. And so, for the boomers out there, if we want to think of the bottom line, that's going to help your bottom line if you retain people. We don't have to continue to work the way that we always have.
So what does your role look like today, and how are you showing up in it?
I run all of our diversity, equity, inclusion programs. When I took over our Affinity programming, there was only a women tech founder and a Latin tech founder cohort that ran about 10, 11 weeks. And everything that I do is personal and professional development. Today, we have women tech founders, Latin tech founders, Black tech founders, women tech founders, Black tech founders, and Latin tech leaders, so people that work within a larger company. We also have 3 pitch competitions and 4 community resource groups. So I've led the charge on all of those, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what kind of talents and superpowers do you bring to the work that you do?
That kindness. Sometimes I'm too empathetic. I don't know if you ever felt this way, but someone's embarrassing themselves, and I'm just I can't. I gotta leave. Like, I just feel it in every
Like
every bit of me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I really bad, really bad. But I meet people where they are, and I listen to them and I let them speak, and I think that's really big for advocacy, right? Is to let others tell their own story. And as someone who is not Black, who is not Latin, who's not LGBTQ, I know that I don't have all the answers and I shouldn't be speaking for those groups, so I don't. I trust the people that I put in place around me who are experts in those areas or have those lived experiences, and they help me shape the curriculum and the community events and anything else that we're doing. And I make sure that I'm not tokenizing any one person, right? I can't just hear from one person. Like, you couldn't just talk to me about the disabled group and I can speak for everyone who's disabled, right? And we need to hear a range of disabilities. The same with every other lived experience. You have to hear a range. And so I tried very hard to let others speak for themselves. I think, as I said, that empathy portion, while it can make me really uncomfortable sometimes, it's also very good because I've had my own trials. So while I can't directly relate to how a Black woman might feel in the workplace, I do understand that there are these hurdles that you have to get over that are really hard, and they may be different, but they're still hurdles. And so how can I show up for you and helping get over those hurdles, those roadblocks? And then kindness and honesty, and just really cheerleading. Like, cheerleading is a big part of this role. If I had $1 for every single woman founder who went through my program who said, I don't feel like I'm doing a good enough job on my company, and I don't feel like I'm doing a good enough job as a mom, and I don't know how to do both at the same time, I would have a lot of money, because unfortunately I hear that every single cohort. And just to have a group of people around you, or someone like me, a leader, telling you you are doing the best that you can and it's showing and you are doing great, can, change the outlook for people. And so just constantly cheerleading and meaning it, not placating, but really meaning it. Because I think all of these different underrepresented groups are just doing the best they can. And just to tell them that, yeah, you're doing a great job. No matter how that effort feels to you, you're doing a great job and it's showing, is really important.
Okay, so this has come up a couple of different times in this conversation in a couple of different contexts. How can you let people speak for themselves, share what they need, tell their own stories? I think this is a huge part of advocacy, as Alysha-Aubrey mentions. And she shares that meeting people where they are and truly listening is one of her superpowers. And I love this so much. I think in a lot of inclusion work and when we talk about allyship, there can be this sense of, oh, I have to protect this group of people from harm. And while that's a nice intention, true allyship is about lifting up the voices and the perspectives from those individuals themselves, letting people speak for themselves and helping to enable that to happen. And this can be as simple as an example, in a meeting, if you notice that there's someone not being heard or talked over, and you're in a position of power or privilege, using your voice to make space for theirs. Oh, I think so and so was saying something really important, and I'd really like to hear it. Or supporting that person behind the scenes to help them figure out how to maybe navigate an organization to get certain accommodations and mentoring them on how to work within a system. But ask people what they need from you and what support looks like, and then you get to do that, right? Don't jump into the middle unless they really ask you to. It's not about saving people, but about making room for their voice and their story. I think Meghan Markle did a talk years ago and said something like, you don't need to help people find their voice. They already have one. They just need to be encouraged to use it. So I think taking this a step further, if you're in a position of power or privilege in any room, your job is to proactively make space for their voice. As we think about like your growth and development, whether that's personal or professional, I like to always ask my guests, what are some of the tools that have helped you along the way? And so I want to talk about kind of going forward, but first, in those more difficult times in your career, whether it's recognizing that your needs are different or starting to actually advocate for what you needed, what were some tools or resources or practices in your own life or maybe relationships that you have that helped you get through those difficult times?
I think the first is open honesty and transparency. I hadn't been dating a lot after I was diagnosed because I knew that my needs were different, and I was nervous about having to tell that to someone that I would potentially be in a relationship with. And it's funny because the person that I'm with now, I've been with for 3 years, and on our first date, I said, hey, I have narcolepsy. Sometimes I sleep too much. Sometimes I trip on my words. Sometimes I do this and that. And instead of laughing at it or pushing off, he said, okay, tell me more. And I knew that I had been seen, and he's there to help me. He's there to wake me up when I have ignored the 17th alarm, or understanding that I have energy at 3 a.m. and he doesn't. And so just let me be, let me do my thing. And he's been really amazing about that. And that goes for friendships too. It's very clear to me who my good friends are that don't get offended if I don't answer that text message right away, or back out of an event at the last minute because I'm just too exhausted. It's actually pretty nice. It's like a good friend detector.
I was going to say, it sounds like a good filter for dating too, is to just, put it out on the table on your first date.
Yeah, it worked out real well. Really well. And so that openness and honestness, and you can tell people that care, and those are the ones that support me no matter what and give me the grace that I need. And I try to give them that grace back. I think something else that has really helped me is there is a online community for folks with narcolepsy, and it's as simple as like just a funny meme that someone else that's going through this has posted, and I'm like, God, I can relate to that, and that feeling that I'm not alone, because narcolepsy is really, really underdiagnosed. The average age is about 30 to 45.
Wow.
I don't know how I could have made it that long without knowing, to be frank. And so knowing that other people are out there, and it's about 1 in 2,000 people that have it. So it's very common, but very underdiagnosed. And I have found a lot of happiness in talking to other people that have it. I've only ever met 2 people in person that have it, that know that they have it, after all these years. Yeah, but helping other people talk about it, or I'll have friends come up to me and say, my friend's going through XYZ. Do you think that could be narcolepsy? And, I always say, I don't know. but I would highly suggest that they get a sleep study and start there and see where that goes. And that feels really good to maybe being that person that can help someone else realize what they're going through.
Yeah. Now, as somebody who identifies as an overachiever, right, and I can relate to you on this, but and like values hard work, how do you navigate the tension between like that's important to you and it's part of who you are, and you can't show up and be, doing certain things the same way that everybody else does? How do you navigate the tension between knowing that you have needs and wanting to overachieve?
Yeah, and wanting to ignore those needs.
For wanting to pretend that we're all invincible and like have an endless battery. Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it's hard. There's some times when I'm mad at myself for not being able to do more or take on more. But I keep a list of all of my accomplishments at work, big and small. And when I'm having, and that's true. I'm not just saying that. I know that sounds like something hokey, but I keep a list of all of my accomplishments, big and small, and I look at it when I'm feeling that way or I'm feeling down, or I have other friends in the tech world that just seem to be at every single event and know every single person and can network effortlessly. And I am so awkward at networking because half the time I can't follow what people are saying because I'm tired and, whatever's happening. But I look at that list and I realize how much I've grown and how much I do and how that's impressive. And I try to remind myself that for the accommodations that I need and how screwed up my brain is from this disability, I'm killing it. And I gotta let myself sit in that sometimes.
So what do your growth goals for yourself look like? What's next for you as a leader or as a person?
As a leader, I've been at 1871 now for 7 years, and I love all the work that I've done. I'm ready to grow it more, get a team beneath me. I'm currently a team of one, which can be a lot. But hey, that's that nonprofit life, right? You do a lot with a little.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping to do more things like this, maybe doing my own workshops and programming. I've spoken on some panels and I've done some educational workshops, but I'd like to dig in deeper to that because I really do find joy in those things. I'm happy to do the nitty gritty and the background stuff, but I think I get a lot of joy out of info sessions and telling people what I'm passionate about. And there's more in there that I can do with that. And then personally, saving some money, doing that millennial thing, trying to pay off the school debt, maybe buy a new car. My car is on its last leg.
Any day now.
Any day now. Yeah, scary. And, digging into my hobbies more. Having narcolepsy can be really hard mentally. And so I like hobbies that I can kind of just turn my brain off. And it's almost like meditation for me. So I do a lot of crochet and amigurumi and that kind of stuff. And I find a lot of joy in that.
That's great. I just bought some little like embroidery kits for a girls' weekend that I went on earlier in the year because I used to cross stitch when I was a kid and it was like all the rage back in the late 80s, right? I don't know. And so I was like, there was something nostalgic about it, but also very meditative, like you said, about being detailed and following, a pattern and things like that. So I love that.
Well, I cross stitch and crochet. I'm happy to help you if you need it.
Okay, good to know.
I used to do embroidery, like hand embroidery on clothing. But every time I try to sell my stuff, the magic of it kind of leaves. So I stopped doing that. I just do it for me now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw I've seen a meme that says that millennial urge to turn every hobby into a revenue stream. So
yep.
We do
because
that.
We need it. Because we need the money.
Yes, that's also true. That's also
but
true.
Yes, we do that.
Amazing. Well, I want to wrap us up and just thank you for being on, for sharing your story, for being the open book that you are and doing that here on this podcast. I think that it is incredibly important to have people who do feel like, yeah, I want to put this out into the world because it's going to have this exponential effect of helping normalize things for people, helping someone else feel maybe a little more brave to advocate for themselves. And it's really meaningful beyond what we can even see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, if something doesn't feel right, just keep advocating for yourself. You'll figure it out, but keep pushing because the system is not set up for us to know. As women, as someone with a disability, there's a lot against us, and you just got to keep pushing through those walls and those hurdles, and you'll come out the other side. It may take a while, but like me, I finally was put on the best medication of my life. It has changed everything for me. It only took, 6 years of diagnosis, but it is the first FDA-approved narcolepsy medication in the world. Very first, after, with such a common disability. But
Yeah.
it's changed everything. Now I'm awake during the day, and I don't know how you normal people do it with all of this time. There's too much time to fill in the day. It's very strange.
That's what Netflix is for.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. And I'm like, oh my God, what is 8 a.m. is a thing? I didn't know that.
Well, there's always more hobbies.
There's always more hobbies. There's always more crochet.
Exactly. Well, thank you again for being on. I really appreciate you.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Okay, I so appreciate Alysha-Aubrey's openness to discuss her own disability and the challenges that she encountered in not only just getting it diagnosed in the first place and how much it took to trust herself and keep advocating for herself within the healthcare system, but then also to share it with those she worked with and show that she can be even more effective and ensure she's able to really prioritize her well-being with specific accommodations and some understanding. I also love how she's really able to own her superpowers and how she developed this self-trust, knowing that she's an incredible producer and that the hours that she was or wasn't working really had very little to do with her impact and results. Now, throughout the conversation, we touched on advocating for yourself in this episode, as well as being an advocate for others. And I want to spend just a few more minutes here. Now, of course, there's so much good content out there on the topic of allyship, and I'm going to link a couple of books and an article in the show notes for you to explore further. But I wanted to quickly summarize a couple of points that we talked about along the way in this episode. So let's talk about how to be a good ally and advocate for others at work. I think that's first about doing your own work, and then as you continue to do that, doing the work to show up for others. So if we start with doing your own work, I think there's two things really here. One is to educate yourself. Reflect on your own privilege and use it to advocate for those who don't have it. We all have some type of privilege in some rooms that we're in, and recognizing where that is can help us see where we can maybe take a step back and enable someone else to take a step forward. And the second part is to listen more, to pause more, and honestly, to learn to be okay with discomfort. It's a muscle that you have to build. And so none of us are an expert in this space of how to be an ally and how to leverage our own privilege to advocate for others. It's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to make mistakes, and we have to build that muscle of being okay with feeling uncomfortable. So the second thing is, as we're doing our own work, as we continue to do our own work, is how we show up for others. First, don't assume that you know what people need. It's important to ask them what they need and ask how you can support them. And then let people speak for themselves. Let them tell their own stories. Let them share from their experience and perspective what it is they need. And where their voice maybe isn't being heard, this is where we have an opportunity to use our power or our privilege to proactively make space for their voice.